Hi everyone, I'm Ayça, and today I'll be interviewing our amazing violin faculty, Jennifer Frautschi. Hi Jennifer, thank you so much for doing this with me, and I hope you had a great Halloween.
Hi, Ayça. Thank you for joining me for this interview. And I did have, if you can see that, that's my daughter's sign that says Happy Halloween. And
Mhm.
I know people have difficulty pronouncing my name, and you did a great job, but people often ask me how to pronounce it. So I just tell them that it rhymes with grouchy. Grouchy Frauchy was one of my nicknames, my the mean nicknames that people gave me when I was a kid. So, but it's a good way to remember.
What do you like the most about our music department?
I think the music department at Stony Brook is really unusual and really special. And I'm sure people at every music department say that. But what is really unique, I think, about our community are the students who, because we are mainly a graduate department. I'm teaching all graduate students. You're currently our only master's student. Actually, the rest are all doctoral students. So, it's a certain type of student or someone who's at a certain stage in their life. And so people come to us very much self-directed, self-motivated, and we just have such a great range of personalities and really special people who come to us from all around the world, which to me is really interesting, but also with very different interests and skill sets. So some people come with a lot of teaching experience, other people come because they want to gain teaching experience, and then there are others who have a lot of new music experience or are more Baroque specialists or who have already started their own organizations. A lot of our students do start, whether it's schools that cater to young kids that are educational institutions, or they start chamber music festivals, or they start, organizations that serve underserved communities. So it's a really special mix of people who come to us at a certain stage in their life, and that to me is so invigorating because I learned so much from talking to individual students.
Is there any fun fact about you which you could share with us?
Well, I don't know if these are fun facts, but I'll tell you two things. I'll share two things. One is that when I was growing up, when I was a little kid, I did not think that I would become a violinist because I didn't believe I was good enough. And, I started playing before I turned 3. So I've been playing the violin as long as I can remember. And I was a pretty serious student, but I just thought that violin was something that was part of my education. And I just didn't believe that it was, I was good enough to pursue it as a career. So I'll tell you what I wanted to be instead. At a certain point, I wanted to be a hairdresser because
Oh,
I thought that would be really fun. And however, I have an older sister, Laura, who's a violinist, and a couple of times she let me cut her hair and it was a disaster. Actually, the first time it was good, and then she let me do it again and it was a disaster. So um, that was not going to work out. Another point, when I was, I think 11, 10 or 11, I learned to type like at an old fashioned typewriter, and I typed pretty well. So I remember deciding and announcing to my parents that I wanted to be a secretary when I grew up, and I would move to Santa Barbara because I grew up in Los Angeles and I knew Santa Barbara was a beautiful place to live. I would still love to live there. And so that was my, for a while, that was my life goal to be a secretary in Santa Barbara. And I think I would have been quite happy if I'd followed that path. I'm so good at typing, I think I'd be a pretty good secretary, I think. Um, but actually, my from the time I was probably 8 to through high school, through 16, 17, when I left for college, um, I really wanted to be a writer. And I've always been, since I was a little girl, a reader of fiction. And, I used to read so much. My sister and I would just go to the library and check out stacks of books and come home and read. And I've always admired writers and composers very much. That to me is kind of like at the pinnacle of all professions. People who creative people who create out of their imagination, stories and books and pieces of compositions. Um, Visual artists, of course, and choreographers are creators too. But I wanted to be a writer. However, it's a skill I never really honed or developed. I'm not a particularly good writer. But when I was probably 14 or 15, in my high school, I had, various opportunities to try my hand at journalism. So, I was involved in the school newspaper, school yearbook, and so on. But I remember going to my violin teacher when I was maybe 15. This is my teacher, Robert Lipsett in Los Angeles, who was a huge influence and is really the reason I ended up pursuing a career in music, because he encouraged me and made me believe in myself. But I remember going to him and saying, I think I'd like to become a music critic, because that way I can, again, to go back to the fact that I didn't think I was good enough to pursue a career in violin. But I said that way I can marry my interest in music with my interest in writing and journalism. And he got really irritated with me and said, I mean, because you can understand from his standpoint, he was investing all this time in me as a student playing the violin. He basically was like, why don't you keep practicing? Other fun fact is that since I was a little girl, but still now as yes, a grown woman, I am obsessed with stuffed animals, and I have a large collection. People who come to my house think that all the stuffed animals that are around are my daughter's, but in fact, they're mine. So you can see, for example, behind me, there's
Oh,
a
yeah.
fox, a pig, right? You see fox, pig, lion. Those are all mine. And actually, this pig is sort of funny how I came to have this pig. When I was finishing my studies at Juilliard, I went to the Queen Elizabeth competition, and I was a finalist. I can't remember exactly what year this was. It was a long time ago, but it was when Nikolai Snyder was the first prize winner. Christoph Barati was the second prize winner. And so during that process of getting to the finals, and there were a lot of interviews, radio interviews, TV interviews that were broadcast nationally to both Flemish and French-speaking francophone stations. And at some point in one of those interviews, I must have said that when I was asked, I don't know, something personal or what I liked, I must have said at that point that I collected pigs, because I had lots of like a pig cutting board and pig just stuff. That was just pig bowls, pig pictures. So then after the competition was over, I gave a concert and someone showed up with this pink pig
Oh my God,
as a gift. And so I brought it home with me from Belgium, from Brussels. That pig, and I've had it ever since. But yeah, I collect, like, this is a jellycat. This is the brand that I love. Here's a
so
mushroom,
cute.
and here's, like, for example, a cactus. They just make me happy.
They're so cute.
I know, right? I
Yeah.
mean, how could this not make you happy? And the best thing about it is that it doesn't need to be watered.
That's
They
amazing.
never die.
Yeah, my plants always end up dying.
There
It's
you
very
go. So if you
sad.
have a stuffed jellycat plant, I have some other plants that they're in other parts of the apartment. Then they never die. They just bring you joy every time you look at them.
What are your advices for young violinists who want to pursue a career in solo performance?
My advice for young violinists would be the same advice I'd give actually to any aspiring musician. And so this is really not violin specific. There are probably four things that are, for me, the cornerstone and the things that I live by. The first one is that it is so important to be curious, and to be curious as a student, but to be curious for the rest of your life. Because as musicians, whether it's violinist or pianist or singer, or guitarist, our role really is to communicate with people through the medium of music, right? And yes, that comes about through intense study on the instrument and and perfecting technical skills and so on. But I think part of being communicative and communicating, which is the most important thing,
Mhm,
is really having an open mind and an open heart.
mhm,
And by being curious, constantly curious, I think that helps inform all of the musical decisions you make, but it also helps you just become a more communicative performer. So by curious, I mean, like in violin class since last spring, we've been talking a lot about and listening to together about being curious about our musical heritage, right? And listening to old recordings, to just be curious about different styles of playing and different approaches to the violin. So I mean that's very specific, right? But when I say curious, I mean curious about the world out there, about going to museums, seeing visual art, being curious. I'm looking out my window at the buildings around me, being curious about architecture, just how that might inform how you approach a piece of music, because a piece of music is constructed
mhm,
just as a building is constructed. Um, being curious about dance. We talked about this in class for Baroque music, playing the Bach partita is looking at what do these dance forms look like, or if you're studying Tchaikovsky or Stravinsky, being curious about ballet. And any contemporary composer should be curious about what modern dance looks like. And all of that is so available online now. And reading anything. I mentioned that since I was a little girl, I love reading fiction and novels. And that to me has been such a way of opening up perspective onto uh, you know, different worlds, different ways of thinking, different time periods, different countries, different planets. But um, last week I gave a lesson to one of your colleagues, one of our students who doesn't usually take lessons with me, and it was a piece that I didn't know. But the student said to me, "Oh, you have such imagination," and and it was such a compliment to me in a way. But I was thinking, it's not that I have imagination; it's just that I'm curious, and because I'm curious, I'm able to draw on a lot of different ideas or images, right? And part of curiosity is also, this is really important, and this will lead to my second piece of advice, which is um, you should be curious about people constantly, curious about your teachers, curious about your classmates, and the person who's next to you waiting for in line at Starbucks. It can be really interesting when you're waiting in line, especially now during this whole period when people are standing in line for long periods of time. Even if you're 6 feet apart, you can strike up a conversation and sometimes just hear the most amazing narratives, personal narratives, which uh, you could say, what does that have to do with becoming a violinist and having a career? It has a lot to do with it. Being curious about people and being open in that way will make you a more open performer over time. Um, so the second cornerstone, I think, is building community at any stage of your life, even if you're an 8-year-old student or you're in high school or you're doing your undergrad or you're like, a master's student. And building community can mean lots of different things. It can mean within your own studio, violin studio, or within your own department in school. It can mean in your building where you live with a bunch of people who are different ages or from different parts of the world. Or it could be within your church, or could be like if you have kids, your kids' school. I mean, it can mean so many different things, right? Or you're a Turkish student, building community amongst the Turkish students you meet who are in New York, not just at your school, right? I mean, it could mean an infinite array of things, but that is so important as a musician, as an artist, as a human being. But it's something that I think is overlooked sometimes in our education. I was very lucky in that I grew up in a violin studio that was very strong, very tight. And my teacher, Robert Lips in LA, really made that corner, that community so important. And it was very important for my own development. So that's something that, I personally have at every stage of my education and career have tried to create in some way, right? Because it's also those bonds that you form by building community that will um, help you develop as an artist. Like if you build community and you share music with those people, then that community, and encourage other people to share whatever their strengths are.
Yeah.
You know, food, poetry, or kickboxing classes. I don't know, anything. Right? Will really help again, like open up possibility, give you opportunities to express yourself, open yourself up when you're on stage, when it's time to go play on the stage of Carnegie Hall. It all intersects. This concept of building community will help you, yes, actually, when you're under a high pressure situation playing your solo debut. uh, and the third thing is advice, is really learning to listen. And that might seem obvious. So listen to yourself as, whatever your instrument is. Listen to your tone, listen to the phrasing you're making, listen to how you're expressing yourself. But that might seem really obvious, but in my teaching, I'm constantly asking people, what are you actually listening to? Because I feel like the emphasis is so much on what is happening with the fingers, or what's happening with the shoulder rest, or what's happening with the bow arm, and what's the bowing, what's the fingering, and people aren't actually listening. And this is the most important muscle you can develop as a musician, regardless of what your instrument is. Um, and then, of course, listen to the when you're playing solo repertoire, there's just your own voice, but you have to really develop that ability to listen to all the other voices, whether it's the piano, if you're playing a sonata, the other instruments, to really fully listen to them, to
Mhm.
listen to all the other parts of the orchestra, if you're playing in orchestra or if you're playing soloist, but also to learn to just listen to other people, and this is something that I think is missing right now in our current political climate, is that people really aren't listening to each other anymore. And I think that's a shame, because even if you don't agree with someone politically, you should be able to listen to what they have to say. So when I say learn to listen, I mean like at every level, of listening to the sound you're making, listen to your intonation, but also just, listen to the voices around you, whatever that means. And the last thing is, which is kind of related to everything I've just been saying, is to ask yourself again at every stage of your development, whether you're entering a conservatory program at the age of 18, or you're exiting the DMA program at the age of 25 or 32, or whatever age you are, is to ask, what can I do for others? As an artist, as a performer, what can I do for my community? Again, you can define your community however you choose to. It can be, by community can mean, what can I do for planet Earth? Or what can I do for my country? What can I do for my church? What can I do for my family? That is really, I think, to the individual. But I think it's important to, at every stage of development, to ask, what can I bring to the table? What can I bring to others? What can I do for others? Because none of us are honing our craft, perfecting our instruments for ourselves,
Mhm.
right? We're doing it for other people. We're doing it to communicate with other people, to hopefully bring joy to other people, to bring people together, right? So, and the answer to that question, or the answers to that question of what can I do for others, what can I do for my community, will differ for every young artist, I think. But it's so important to ask oneself that all the time.
So thank you so much for doing this interview with me today, and I hope to see you soon in person.
Thank you, Ayça, for taking the time to interview me. And yes, I will definitely be seeing you soon in person.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.